A Marine shoved her at the gate. Then 4 generals arrived and ended his career on the spot, solo life/honor niche. Approximately 3,850 words. Viral hook plus revelation plus explicit karma. Move it, Grandma. This isn't a parking lot for lost tourists. Lance Corporal Cade Hollis didn't lower his voice, and he didn't mean to. He wanted the 2 Marines behind him to hear it. The woman in the faded gray cardigan had done nothing but ask a question. She stood at the main gate of Marine Corps Base Camp Ashcroft in scuffed loafers, holding a cream-colored envelope with both hands like it might blow away. Her car, a 20-year-old sedan with a cracked taillight, idled behind her. When she stepped forward to hand him the envelope, Hollis put his palm flat against her shoulder and shoved. She stumbled backward off the curb, caught herself on the guard shack, and a small blue box tumbled out of her bag and skittered across the asphalt. Behind Hollis, Corporal Reese laughed. A phone came up to film. "Please," the woman said quietly, bending for the box. "I only need you to check the list. There's no list for people like you." What Hollis didn't know was that the blue box on the ground held the Navy Cross, the second highest award this country gives for valor, and that the woman he had just shoved had earned it dragging 4 bleeding Marines out of a burning tree line 40 years ago. What Reese didn't know was that in 11 minutes, a motorcade carrying 4 general officers would roll through that gate, and every one of them owed this woman their life. And what neither of them understood yet was that by noon, Hollis would be standing at attention in the base commander's office, while his career ended one flat sentence at a time. But for now, the woman just picked up her box, wiped it clean on her sleeve, and waited. 3 hours earlier, Eleanor Whitfield had woken before dawn in a quiet house, alone, with no idea the day would end the way it did. Her house was small and full of a dead man's things. 41 years married to Sergeant Major Ray Whitfield, 2 years a widow, and she still hadn't moved his reading glasses from the kitchen windowsill. She made coffee the way she'd made it since the war, strong enough to stand a spoon in, and drank it standing up, watching the light come gray over the backyard where Ray's tomato cages had long since gone to rust. The envelope had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Heavy paper, an embossed seal. She had read it a dozen times and still didn't quite believe it. The Marine Corps was opening a combat trauma training center at Camp Ashcroft, the place where a new generation of corpsmen would learn to do the things she had done in the dark all those years ago. Keep a torn open man breathing until the helicopters came. And they were putting her name on the building. The Whitfield Center for Combat Casualty Care. There would be a ceremony, generals, a band, a ribbon, and a pair of oversized scissors. She had almost not gone. She was 71. Her knees complained on the stairs. She hadn't worn anything but flats in a decade, and she owned exactly one nice cardigan, gray, that she wore to funerals and now, apparently, to this. She looked at her hands around the coffee mug, the old burn scars along the right one, pale and smooth now. The knuckles she could no longer fully close. Those hands had carried men. She didn't think about it much anymore. You didn't survive it by thinking about it. She got the little blue box down from the closet shelf where it lived beside Ray's folded flag. She almost left it home. Then she remembered the letter said guests may wear or display personal decorations. And something in her, some stubborn 40 years buried thing, put the box in her bag. Not to show off. Just so it would be there. So he would be there in a way. The men she'd pulled out. The ones she hadn't, Emma, her granddaughter, had offered to drive her. Eleanor had said no. She could still drive. She could still do most things, thank you. and she wasn't going to arrive at a Marine base being handled like porcelain. She backed the sedan out at 7, the cracked taillight rattling, and drove 90 minutes with the radio off. Rehearsing nothing, expecting nothing, a small woman in a gray cardigan going to watch some men put her name on a wall. She had left an hour early. She hated being late. That hour was the only reason any of it happened the way it did. The gate at Camp Ashcroft was busy at 8. Trucks, staff cars, a line of commuters flashing IDs. Eleanor pulled to the visitor lane and rolled her window down, and the young Marine who came to it looked at her car, then at her, and something in his face closed like a door. "Base is restricted access, ma'am." Lance Corporal Hollis said ma'am the way you'd say whatever. "You'll want to turn around at the light. I have an invitation." She held up the envelope. "For the dedication this morning, Whitfield. I should be on a list." Hollis didn't take the envelope. He glanced back at Reese in the guard shack and smirked. "There's a ceremony for base personnel and invited guests. It's not a public thing." He looked at her taillight again, at the loafers, at the 20-year-old paint. "I think you might have the wrong day or the wrong place." "The name is Whitfield," Eleanor said. "Patient." She had been patient with louder men than this. "ELIANOR, please check." "I don't need to check." He said it like it settled things. That was the first shove, not with his hands yet, just with the certainty of a young man who had decided who she was the second he saw her car. Eleanor felt the old heat rise in her chest and set it down again, the way she'd learned to set everything down. She put the sedan in park, unbuckled, and stepped out to hand him the letter directly, thinking a man holding paper might read it. She never got the chance to hand it over. He put his hand flat against her shoulder. "Move it, Grandma," and pushed, and the world tilted. And then she was catching herself on the guard shack with the blue box spinning across the asphalt, and Reese laughing behind the glass. For a moment, Eleanor just stood there, one hand on the shack, breathing, not from the pain, though her hip had found the curb, from the old, cold clarity that came over her in bad moments. The same clarity that had let her walk into fire once without her legs quitting. She looked at the young man's face and understood him completely. He wasn't cruel exactly. He was 22 and bored and sure of himself, and he had never in his life been made small, and so he'd never learned that you don't do it to other people. She bent and picked up the box. "You dropped your, pill case?" Hollis said, and Reese snorted. "It's not a pill case." Eleanor's voice was very even. A staff sergeant named Doyle had come out of the shack by then, the sergeant of the guard, older, with the tired eyes of a man who wanted his shift to end. He looked at the woman, at the idling sedan blocking the lane, at the phone still up and filming, and made the lazy calculation of a man who has decided the problem is whoever is easiest to make leave. "Ma'am, you're holding up the lane. If you don't have credentials, I need you to move the vehicle." He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask about the box. "Hollis, get the lane moving." "I was invited," Eleanor said, and heard her own voice catch, and hated it. "By the commanding general. My name is on the building." Doyle almost laughed. That was the part that stayed with people later, when the video went around. Not the shove, but the almost laugh, the little exhale of a man who thought he'd heard everything. "Sure it is," he said. "Mom, the vehicle. Now." She could have shown them the box then. Opened it, held up the cross, watched their faces change. Ray used to say she was the only person he'd ever met who could win an argument and choose not to. She looked at Hollis, at Doyle, at Reese's phone, and decided she was not going to spend the medal like a coin to buy respect from men who should have given it for free. She turned to get back in her car and wait for someone with sense. "There you go," Hollis said to her back. "Have a nice drive home." He said it, and 11 minutes later, 4 generals arrived, and he never worked another day as a United States Marine. Here is what Eleanor did next, and it is the reason people cried in the comments. She did not drive off. She pulled the sedan into the far corner of the visitor lot, out of the lane, turned off the engine, and sat with her hands in her lap and the little blue box on the dashboard where the morning sun could reach it. She was not going to make a scene, but she was not going to leave either. Her name was on that building. A boy in a guard shack did not get to decide she wasn't. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Grandma, did you get there okay?" She looked at it a long moment. She thought about the 4 faces she'd been picturing all week, the men who'd asked for this, who'd spent a year of favors and phone calls getting the Corps to name a building after their old corpsman. She thought about the one who hadn't made it out, the 19-year-old whose weight she could still feel across her shoulders on cold mornings. She typed back, "I'm here, running a little early. Everything's fine." She did not tell her granddaughter about the shove. Some habits, protecting the people you love from the worst of a thing, you never lose. What Eleanor did not know, sitting in that hot car with her hands folded, was that the motorcade was already off the highway. 4 staff cars, a color guard, and in the lead vehicle, a lieutenant general who had spent the drive telling a story he'd told 100 times about a firefight in a tree line, and a corpsman half his size who came back for him after everyone said don't. He was 90 seconds from the gate. And the young man in the guard shack was about to have the worst morning of his life. The motorcade came fast and clean, the way convoys of important people do. No sirens, just presence, 4 dark cars, and a lead vehicle flying a red flag with 3 white stars. Hollis snapped it too. This was the part of the job he was good at. He straightened, threw a crisp salute, waved the lead car toward the VIP lane, all business now, the boredom gone. The lead car did not go to the VIP lane. It stopped at the shack. The rear window came down and a face looked out. A black man in his early 60s, close-cropped gray hair, 3 silver stars on his collar, a chest of ribbons that started at his sternum and did not seem to stop. Lieutenant General Marcus Bell. He did not look at Hollis. His eyes went past the shack, past the lane, to the far corner of the visitor lot, to a 20-year-old sedan and a small woman sitting alone inside it. "Stop the car," Bell said. Then to Hollis, in a voice with no heat in it at all, which was worse than any shouting, "Marine, who is that woman?" Hollis's stomach did something it had never done before. "Sir, some civilian, sir. No credentials. We were about to have her move along." The general opened his own door. His aide scrambled. 3 other car doors were opening now down the line. A 2-star, another 2-star, a 1-star, all of them following Bell's gaze to the same corner of the same lot, all of them going very still. Eleanor had seen the flags. She was already fumbling for the door handle. The box clutched to her chest when Marcus Bell crossed the pavement in long strides and stopped in front of her and did the thing none of the men at the gate would ever forget. He came to attention, and a lieutenant general of the United States Marine Corps saluted a 71-year-old woman in a gray cardigan and held it. "Doc," he said, and his voice broke on the single syllable. "Doc Whitfield, ma'am, we were coming to get you." The gate went silent. Not the polite silence of people minding their business, the total, ringing silence of 30 people all understanding something at the same instant. Corporal Reese's phone was still up, and later you could hear, on the video, the exact moment the laughter died in his throat. The other 3 generals reached her a beat behind Bell. Major General Ana Ruiz, who had been a 19-year-old rifleman with a hole in his lung. Major General Tom Kessler, whose legs she'd tied off with her own belt. Brigadier General Danny Okafor, the youngest of the four she carried, the one who'd stopped breathing twice on the way to the LZ and started again both times because she wouldn't let him quit. 4 flag officers, grown men with stars on their shoulders and their own commands and their own men who saluted them. Every one of them stood in front of this woman like the boys they had been. "You saluted first, Marcus," Eleanor said, and her voice wobbled, and she was trying to smile. "You always did have that backwards. You were supposed to let me—" "No, ma'am." Belle's jaw was tight. "Not you. Never you." He finally dropped the salute, and then he saw the way she was standing, favoring her hip. And he saw the little blue box clutched against her chest, and something in his face turned to stone. "Ma'am, why are you all the way out here in the lot? Why aren't you inside?" Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't have to. Marcus Bell had spent 40 years learning to read a scene, and he read this one. The far corner of the lot, the hip, the box knocked loose from its shelf and clutched now like something a person had bent down to rescue off the ground. He turned and looked back at the guard shack, at the young Marine standing frozen in it, and the temperature at the gate dropped to 10 degrees. "General Ruiz," Bell said, without turning around. "Get the base commander on the phone, right now." "Sir." Lance Corporal Hollis's voice came out thin. He had figured it out. You could see the whole thing arrive in his face at once. The woman, the box, the wrong day, the wrong place. "Move it, Grandma," and it was like watching a man realize the floor's gone. Bell walked back to the shack slowly. He was not a big man, but he took up the whole doorway. "You put your hands on her." It was not a question. The video had traveled to a dozen phones already. A captain in the second car had seen it before Bell finished crossing the lot. "You shoved a 71-year-old woman off a curb. On my gate." "Sir, I didn't. I didn't know who she—" "You didn't know who she was." Bell repeated it softly, and it landed like a slap. "Son, that is the only thing you've said that's true, and it is the worst thing you could have said." He let that sit. You don't have to know who somebody is to keep your hands off them. You don't get to know who somebody is and then decide they deserve to be treated like a human being. She was owed that the second she rolled her window down. Everybody is. That you needed stars to arrive before you'd give it to her? That's not a mistake, Marine. That's character. And character is the whole job. Hollis had gone gray. Behind him, Staff Sergeant Doyle had come to a rigid, sweating attention, having done his own math and arrived at the sum of his career. "Staff Sergeant." Bell's eyes moved to him. "You're the sergeant of the guard?" "Yes, sir." "You watched him do it, and your response was to tell her to move her vehicle." Bell nodded slowly. "You had one job at that curb this morning. It wasn't checking IDs, it was being the adult." He turned away. "We'll let the commanders sort the specifics. But understand me, both of you. Whatever you thought you were protecting this base from this morning, you are the thing it needs protecting from." Down the line, a black SUV was tearing up the access road. The base commander, a major general named Alvarez, had been told only that 4 visiting flag officers had stopped at the gate and were not proceeding. Which is the kind of sentence that ends careers before anyone even explains why. What none of the men at the gate knew yet was that the worst part for them was not going to be the shouting. It was going to be the quiet. It was going to be watching 4 generals turn their backs on them entirely and walk a small woman in a gray cardigan to a waiting staff car as if the 2 of them had ceased, in every way that mattered, to exist. They did not shout at Eleanor. They gathered around her the way sons do, Danny Okafor, Brigadier General Okafor now, but 19 forever in her mind, took the blue box gently out of her hands, opened it, looked at the Navy Cross lying on its faded ribbon, and closed it again with both palms like he was holding something warm. "You brought it," he said. "For Petey," Eleanor said. The fifth man, the one she didn't carry out, because there was no out left for him by the time she reached him. She'd held his hand instead. She had never once, in 40 years, told these men that she counted that as failing. And they had never once, in 40 years, let her believe it was. I thought, his name should be there today, since he can't be. "His name's on the wall inside," Okafor said. "First one. We made sure." And that was when Eleanor's composure, which had survived the shove and the sneer and the long, hot wait in the car, finally gave out, and she pressed the back of her scarred hand to her mouth. And General Okafor put his arm around her and held her up, the way she had once, a lifetime ago, held up him. General Ruiz opened the back door of the lead staff car. "Doc, please, ride in with us. You are not spending one more second at this gate." Eleanor looked back once, at the boy in the shack, ash-colored, at the sergeant sweating at attention, at the SUV skidding to a stop, and General Alvarez climbing out with his cover jammed on and his face already an apology. She could have said something to Hollis, a hard word, a soft one. She had, in her life, earned the right to any word she wanted. "He's very young," is all she said to Marcus Bell as he handed her into the car. "Don't let them ruin his whole life over one bad morning." Bell's face didn't move. "Ma'am, with respect," he said, "you keep trying to save people who tried to leave you on the curb. It's the most Doc Whitfield thing I've ever seen." He shut her door gently. "We'll be fair. Fair is not the same as easy." And the motorcade pulled through the gate, past the shack, and did not slow down. The consequences arrived the way consequences do when generals are involved, fast and in writing. Lance Corporal Cade Hollis was relieved of his post before the motorcade reached the parade deck. By the time the ribbon was cut on the Whitfield Center that afternoon, he had been placed on legal hold pending an Article 15, with an assault allegation referred up the chain for review. The phone video by then was on 4 separate command desks and climbing. The base commander did not need General Bell to demand it. Alvarez had watched 30 seconds of that footage in his SUV and known exactly what kind of morning he was going to have. Within a week, Hollis was administratively separated. His enlistment ended not with a plaque, but with a folder. 22 years old, and he would spend the rest of his life explaining a gap on a resume that he could never quite bring himself to explain honestly. The uniform he'd been so sure entitled him to look down on a stranger was the one thing it turned out he couldn't keep. Staff Sergeant Doyle did not lose his career, but he lost the part of it he'd been counting on. The promotion board that had been all but certain came and went without him. He was reassigned off the gate to a desk that counted supply pallets, given a formal letter that would follow his file to retirement, and made to understand, in a closed-door conversation with the sergeant major of the base, that the failure at that curb had not been the young Marine's shove. A shove is a single stupid act, but his own, watching it happen and choosing to protect the wrong person. He would think about that for a long time. Cruelty is loud, but the quiet permission that stands behind it is the thing that lets it happen. And he had been the permission. Eleanor Whitfield heard about none of it until Emma read her a news article the following week. The video by then watched several million times, the headline calling her a hero corpsman and the young Marine a disgrace. Eleanor listened to the whole thing, folded her hands, and was quiet for a while. "I don't like that word for him," she finally said. "Disgrace. He was rude, and he was wrong, and he hurt me, and there were consequences. And there should have been." She looked out the window at Ray's rusted tomato cages. "But he's somebody's boy, and nobody's only their worst 11 minutes. Then she got up and put the coffee on, because it was almost time for her walk, and she did not mention it again. 6 months later, on a cool, bright Saturday, Eleanor Whitfield stood in the lobby of the Whitfield Center for Combat Casualty Care and watched a class of 18 young Navy corpsmen learn to pack a wound. They didn't know she was there at first. She liked it that way. She stood by the wall of names, Petey's first, right where Danny said it would be, in her gray cardigan, watching kids barely older than her granddaughter kneel over rubber dummies and practice the thing that had once been her whole terrible life. One of them, a girl of maybe 19 with her hair in a regulation bun and her hands shaking, couldn't get the tourniquet tight enough and was starting to panic, and the instructor was busy across the room. Eleanor walked over. She knelt, her hip complained, and she ignored it and put her scarred right hand over the girl's 2 young ones. "Don't be gentle with it," she said quietly. "Gentle is what gets him killed. Windlass, and turn until the bleeding stops, and then one more turn, and he'll cuss you out, and that's how you know he's going to live." She turned the windlass with the girl. The bleeding, pretend bleeding, dyed water, stopped. "There, you did that. You'll do it for real one day, and your hands will shake, and you'll do it anyway. That's the whole job." The girl looked at the old woman's hands, at the burned scars, and then up at the wall of names behind her, and then at the little bronze plaque by the door. And Eleanor watched the arithmetic happen in her face, the name on the building, the woman kneeling on the floor beside her, and saw the girl's eyes go wide. Ma'am, you're..." "I'm just somebody who was here first," Eleanor said, and squeezed her hands once, and stood up. Across the room, Marcus Bell, in for the weekend, out of uniform, a grandfather in a golf shirt now, caught her eye and smiled. Danny Okafor was somewhere getting coffee. Petey's name was on the wall. Ray's glasses were still on her windowsill at home, and would be tomorrow. She had almost not come that first morning. She had almost turned the car around at the gate. She was glad now, all the way down, that she hadn't. There were young hands to steady and a name on a wall, and a whole long line of kids who would carry people out of the dark because someone, once, carried her. She helped the next corpsman with his tourniquet, and the next, and did not think about the shove at all.